a good kvittel, a guten moyed, and a gut gebencht yor. I am now recording on Sunday, the fourth day of Chol HaMoed, and tonight is Hoshana Raba, then followed by Shmini Atzeres, and then Simchas Torah. Hoshana Raba, we know, is the cementing factor of our calendar, because our entire system of when Rosh Hashanah can fall out, when Yom Kippur could fall out and cannot fall out, depends on one thing, on Hoshana Rabbah, that it should never fall out on Shabbos, because we take the 5 aravos and we hit it 5 times on the ground. That is so important, and it's midivrei neviim. It's not just Rishonim or before that, it's from the Nevi'im. And if Hoshana Rabbah were to fall out on Shabbos, we couldn't touch those aravos, it's muksa. So to make sure that we never have Hoshana Rabbah, all the Yomim Tovim of the year surround around that factor of when Hoshana Rabbah has to be, and not to fall out on Shabbos. Now we know that Rosh Hashanah there was a ksiva, the writing, and then the Chasima Yom Kippur, and as I've told you, Moshe Rabbeinu asked for an extra day, which he received. So even though there was the Chasima on Yom Kippur, but it was not sent away. And it's sitting on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desk for the Simcha of Sukkot to kick in, and that a person could change. That means if he had a Chasima of whatever he had on Yom Kippur, it can be torn up because it was never sent. When is it finalized? Hoshana Rabbah. And that's why the Chazan puts on a kittel like Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and that's the reason that he says the Kaddish and the tune of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And we know that Hoshana Rabbah, for 99% of Klal Yisrael, that is the finalization when we hit, and it is mamtik the dinim. It sweetens the severity of whatever was written before. And Hoshana Rabbah is the 51st day since Rosh Chodesh Elul. So we went through a whole month of Elul. We went through Rosh Hashanah and the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and then we went through Yom Kippur, and then the days of Simcha, elevating the entire realm. And that's why we say Hoshana. No is Begematria 51. No is Nun Aleph, 51. And what are we asking for? We are asking for that the 51 days that we did the Avodah of fasting on Yom Kippur and taking the shofar on Rosh Hashanah and the lulav and esrog on Sukkot and a Simchas Bais HaShoeva, that all Hoshah, save us. No. In the schus of the 51 days, which is concluding on Hoshana Rabbah and moving into a different realm. Now, even the Minhagim go back almost 2,000 years. We have kreplach that we eat on Hoshana Rabbah, and there's only 2 other days on our calendar that we do that. One is Purim, by the Suda, a kreppel which is dough and inside has the meat. and Erev Yom Kippur, and the third day is Hoshana Raba, and that's why it is triangle. They are made in a triangle to show that it's 3 days that we have the inyan of Hoshana Raba, and that the meat is hidden. That means someone who doesn't know what a krepel is, he doesn't know that the meat is inside till he starts eating. And that's exactly the purpose, because those are 3 days that are above and beyond the eye, that which meets the eye. Purim, and that's why for 2,000 years children wear masquerading costumes on Purim, because the day is concealed. Yom Kippur, that the Satan has no reshus to be makatrig and start up with Klal Yisrael. And Hoshana Raba, which is the third and final hidden day from the Satan and to the benefit of Klal Yisrael. Now, we know that tomorrow night is Shmini Atzeres. The Zohar HaKadosh says that the greatest day of the calendar year is Shmini Atzeres, bigger than Yom Kippur. Now, lahalacha, Yom Kippur we have to keep before we keep that, because the fast, Chas v'Sholom, somebody eats on Yom Kippur, it's Isser Koros, like eating bread on Pesach. But that's why the day has no Gashmi mitzvah, because it's so high that it cannot relate to this world. Sukkos, we take a lulav and an esrog, that's the mitzvah. We sit in a sukkah, a physical sukkah. But Shmini Atzeres is just HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's called in the Zohar Yichuda Shalim, because you see, all the nations, the 70 nations of the world, were welcomed on Sukkot, every day a different nation, and some days there were 8, the next day was 7. They were welcomed in, these were Goyim, welcomed into the Bais HaMikdash to bring the korban and the sacrifice of their nation. But after Hoshana Raba, everybody went home. And only HaKadosh Baruch Hu remained on Shmini Atzeres with Klal Yisrael. This was like the Chosin and Kala after the wedding. They go home. It's private. It's only intimate with Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is Shmini Atzeres. And on Shmini Atzeres we say Yizkor, because on all the hidden days that are above this world, like Yom Kippur is Yovel, Shavuos is also after 50 days of Oimer, Sfiras Oimer, and then you have the 8th day of Pesach, which 8 we know is above and beyond this world. We only have 7 days of the week. If somebody asks you, what is the 8th day of the week? They would say, there is no 8th day. There's only 7. But the 8th that we keep, like Shmini Atzeres, is above this world, and that's why we say Yizkor on those 4 days, which is like the Olam HaNeshamos, that these are the days that the Neshamas have the realm and the ability to soar heavenward, because it's above this world. Now, in Eretz Yisrael, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah are the same day. But that was why many tzaddikim didn't want to move to Israel. Because if they moved to Eretz Yisrael, they'd only have one day, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. And they didn't want to give up the dimension of Simchas Torah. For instance, on Shmini Atzeres, you can only give 5 aliyahs. On a regular Shabbos, you're allowed to add aliyahs if you want. But on Shmini Atzeres, you can only have 5. But on the next day, when you're out of Eretz Yisrael, here in America, or Chutz La'aretz, you can do as many aliyahs as you have to, that everyone in the shul should get an aliyah. So we see a major difference in the actuality of the day between Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah being able to flourish in its depth and in its height to its fullest extent, because Shmini Atzeres is Shmini. It's above this world. And on the next day, Simchas Torah is heavenward. It is so high that we can have as many aliyahs, and the only thing we do Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, it is no mitzvah gashmi. There is nothing that we take, like eat matzah or take a lula. It's only the simcha of the day with our dancing with our feet. And that is the conclusion of all of the days of since Rosh Chodesh Elul into Tishrei and into Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot. Now, we know that Shmini Atzeres, the Gemara refers to it as, the Shulchan Aruch refers to it as a regel bifnei atzma. Because we say Shechianu both nights, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. Now, if it's a Sveika Diyoma, like we have 2 days Pesach, then you should have a bracha made when we sit in the sukkah. In other words, the halacha is you're supposed to eat in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. Many Hasidim do not eat on Shmini Atzeres in the sukkah. But the basic halacha says you're supposed to, but we don't make a bracha on the sukkah. Now, if it was a Sveika Diyoma, we should make a bracha, because the 7th and 8th day are both Sveika Diyoma. And we should just, like on Pesach, we do everything with brachas and everything, because it's a Sveika, it's a question of when Rosh Chodesh was and when the actual day falls out. So, it's a very unique difference with Shmini Atzeres. And if you remember, the Gemara tells the story of a ger who came to Bais Shammai, and he said to him, I want you to teach me the whole Torah on 1 foot. And Bais Shammai thought he was a wise guy. What do you mean, the whole Torah on 1 foot? And he kicked him out. And he came to Beis Hillel, and Beis Hillel said to him, the single klal, if you want to have in short, what is the essence of the Torah? It's v'yahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow Jew like you love yourself. Now this ger was no fool, and he was not making fun, as the Bnei Yissaschar and others write about this story, because he learned the entire Torah in his preparation for becoming a Yid, but he had one question after all the learning. What is the essence of this day, Shmini Atzeres, that you call a regel bifnei atzma? See, when he came into Beis Shammai, he says, I want you to teach me the Torah, al regel achas. Teach me the essence of that Shmini Atzeres that the Shulchan Aruch calls regel achas. Because what is it? Is it Sukkos or is it after Sukkos? That we're told to sit in the Sukkah by both Seudos at night and by day? But we're told not to make a bracha. The Gemara says, Meisav Yasvinan, we sit in the Sukkah, but Bruchi, a bracha, lo mevarachinan, we do not make a bracha once we are in the Sukkah. So that's what Beis Hill answered, and he said that the uniqueness of Shmini Atzeres, and with all of its hidden secrets, the cementing factor in holding together the whole day of Shmini Atzeres and coming out with all of the luster and all of the production of the essence of Shmini Atzeres is attaching yourself to another Yid and loving him the way you love yourself. So when we go into Shmini Atzeres, or tonight into Hoshana Raba, we have to direct our attention, because when you do a mitzvah, it goes up according to your kavanah. That means once you do the mitzvah, you shake the lulav and esrog, and you made the bracha before, you have the mitzvah. But if you want the packaging to be with the ribbons and with the beautiful dimension of packaging, have in mind that the mitzvah is to do a nachas ruach, a pleasurable act, so that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu will look at the mitzvah and appreciate it with a heightened joy and a tremendous level of nachas ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which will be reflected in the reward and the good things that he does for you. Now, I want to shift gears now and talk about Bereshis. Next Shabbos is Parashas Bereshis. We begin reading the Torah anew, and it is also Shabbos Mevorachim. That means we're going to bench the Chodesh of Cheshvan. Now, Cheshvan is unique because it's the only month in the calendar year that has no Yom Tiv and no fast day in it. Every day is a simple day. Because the fast days, the Navi Zechariah said, when Mashiach will come, are all going to become Yomim Tovim. So if we have a month like Teves, or Tammuz that has no Yom Tov, but it has Asara B'Teves, a fast day, and Tammuz has Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, they are in essence a Yom Tov. Just until the Golus ends, it's covered and cloaked in a regular day, and even a step further, a fast day. But in the future, it will indeed glow and present itself with all of its essence and be a Yom Tov day after Mashiach comes. Now, why is it that Cheshvan was left with no Yom Tov? No fast day, no Yom Tov. And the answer is that the first Bais HaMikdash was built by Shlomo HaMelech, and when he finished it in the month of Cheshvan, and he wanted to make a tremendous celebration. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God told him, no, don't do it now. I want you to wait 11 months till next Tishrei. And then you're going to have a tremendous celebration and dedication of the first Bais HaMikdash. So the Medrash says that the month of Cheshvan went up in heaven and said, he finished in my month. Why did you deny me such a pleasure and dignity of having the celebration in my month? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm reserving you for the third Bais HaMikdash, that when it comes down from heaven, after Mashiach comes, it will come down finished, and we're going to celebrate its coming in the month of Cheshvan. So the first Bais HaMikdash of Shlomo was celebrated in Tishrei. The third is going to be celebrated in Cheshvan. And the second Bais HaMikdash, its main celebration was Hanukkah, which is Kislev. Those are 3 months in a row: Tishrei, Cheshvan, and Kislev. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Davka Cheshvan to have the month of the eternal celebration. That means they celebrated for the first Bais HaMikdash, but it was destroyed. They celebrated the second Bais HaMikdash, and that was destroyed. But the third will never be destroyed. So there is a uniqueness and a specialty about the third Bais HaMikdash that will supersede any consideration of its dimension. Now, why Cheshvan? The Arizal says that every month corresponds to a different Shevet, and the month of Cheshvan corresponds to Menashe. So Menashe really was owed a gift because he was the Bechor, but Yaakov Avinu knew he wasn't as big as Ephraim. So he wanted specifically to give the right hand on his head and not his. But as a tikkun, if you remember, for the shuls that read the Torah on Simchas Torah night, that means when we leave Shmini Atzeres, when we go into Simchas Torah, after all the dancing and all the 7 hakafas, when we lane Zos HaBracha, and some Al Pi Kabbalah lane something else, but most do Zos HaBracha, and when the person comes for Hagbah to pick up the Torah, he crosses over and the Torah is turned around. So usually by Hagbah, the person who's going Hagbah can see the letters and the paragraphs and the pages of the Sefer Torah. It's facing him, but not on Simchas Torah. He goes like this and picks up the Torah and turns it around, that the words and the everything is on the other side, facing the congregation. Why is that done? That's done as a repayment to Menashe, who had the arms crossed, so we now take the Sefer Torah at the pinnacle, at the turret, at the highest point of Simcha for Klal Yisrael. And we're able to, he's able to bask in the glory of all the Sifrei Torah of the world, because it's his month. And that's why there was no Yom Tov put into Cheshvan or fast day. So that Klal Yisrael, when the third Bais HaMikdash comes, Menashe's month will bask in the dynamics of Simcha beyond Simcha in its dedication of the third Bais HaMikdash. And we are Mevarech the Chodesh, this Shabbos, the month of Cheshvan. So there is a very high level. Other Meforshim simply say that we achieve such a position of height with having been elevated Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and everything else, that you don't need the hashpah of a Yom Tov to give us the Birkas Moyadecha, so that's why there's no Yom Tov in the month of Cheshvan. So we then, this Shabbos, begin reading Bereshis. I remember how many thousands of people in Williamsburg, when Torah Vodaas was in Williamsburg, and it came Simchas Torah, thousands came to the Satmar Rebbe because he was the Baal Koira, and it says in Sifrei Kabbalah that the entire events of the upcoming year are nichlol, are encompassed within the word Bereshis. And they wanted to hear the Satmar Rebbe, who was super holy, say the word Bereshis while he was laning. They only came for the one word. They stood there, they opened the Sefer, they called the Kohen, and he laid Bereshis Bara Elokim, and then you saw thousands flocking out of the Beis HaMedrash. Now, there were certain events which took place as the highlights of the Parsha. For instance, we know that Adam and Chava were created and they lived in Gan Eden. Now that Gan Eden wasn't just the lowest level, like when Mashiach comes, that's level 1, level 8. And then Tchias HaMesim, that all the dead stand out of the graves, that's level 9. And then you have Olam Haba, which is even higher than the Tekufa surrounding the world of Tchias HaMesim, and that's called Olam Haba. Adam and Chava were in the level in Gan Eden of Olam Haba. And had they not eaten from that Eitz Hadas, there would never have been death or sickness or any of these things in this world. There'd be no cemeteries, no hospitals, nothing. But they couldn't wait. Says the Arizal, they were only forbidden from eating from when they were created, which was the 9th hour, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They couldn't eat until 6. But 6 o'clock they were allowed to make Kiddush and take from the grapes. So they only had to wait 3 hours, and they couldn't do it. The snake came in and convinced them, it's baloney, you could eat, you could do. And we are suffering 5,786 years because they ate. And it would have all been fixed up if they wouldn't have made the egel when they got the Torah. Then everything would have reverted to pure olam haba. But they made the egel. So that's why we, 3,300 years, are sitting here in Saras with Goyim yelling at us, dirty Jew, and all that stuff. And when Mashiach will come, then we will finally conclude the 4,000 years of being scapegoated and persecuted and expelled from countries and all of that which we lived through. So that's what the Arizal says. Had they waited the 3 hours, they could have made Kiddush and they would have been home, never driven out of Gan Eden. Now, we know that on the second day of creation, it does not say Ki Tov, because it was good, like it says on all the other days. Ki Tov. The trees were created, Ki Tov. The water, but when the second day, when the whole world was filled with water, and Hashem, as the pasuk says, Vayavdel Elokim es harakia, that half the water went up and became the heaven, and the other half went down and stayed here and were the oceans, lakes, seas, rivers down here. And as I told you, the rivers down here and the water down here was very angry that they were not put up, and I explained to you that they were told that they will have the salt, which will go on the Mizbeach. And even though it was 2,500 years later, but it was a mitzvah and such a schus, they were thrilled with the answer, and they accepted it, and they were very happy. But it says that since there was machloikis, division created on that day, there was a division of waters. It doesn't say Ki Tov. But on the other hand, the first day, it was dark, and Hashem created light, and He made a separation that when light comes, darkness disappears. You can walk into a auditorium that's pitch black, and you come with one little candle, and it dispels the darkness. So why is the second day no Ki Tov? Because of division. But on the first day there was a division of darkness and light. And it does say Ki Tov. So the answer that the Mefarshim say is a lesson for all of us. Because on the first day there was division, but there's such a thing as good division. That means when there's something that's dark, let's say friends, you have two 17-year-old boys, and one boy wants to study more and learn more and do certain mitzvahs, and the other friend says, who needs it? Let's go to the movies and let's this, or even worse things. So the friend that notices, that's something I'm not going to be able to have as a useful item of growth in my development, and he parts ways with that friend. The Chavetz Chaim, used to make every single year a big seuda, but no one knew what it was for. It wasn't his birthday. It wasn't, why the celebration? So when he turned 85, like 8 or 9 years before he died, before he was nifter, he told him, he said it was because on this day as a teenager, I parted ways with a friend that I saw we were both going in the wrong direction. So we don't look at the first day as division, the light and the dark. We look at it as a positive, the backbone, the cementing factor of what a person has to be critical and opening up his eyes and realizing that not every friendship and relationship is good for me. And to be able to recognize that you have to make a division of good and bad. And that's why we write Ki Tov, but not for the next day. The next day was a pure division of waters. And they had a claim, and they were explained that they're going to be paid for that claim. Now, the Chazal say that before Hashem created the world, he was Borei Olamos Umachrivan. That he created the world and he wasn't happy and he destroyed it. And he made another world and again destroyed it. And then he made our world and he was happy. Now, someone could make the mistake and think, like a human architect, he makes plans and he doesn't like what comes out, so he tears it up and he redoes. We're talking about God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What do you mean that he created a world, but he didn't like it, so he said, that's not what I want. He knew what was going to be. We're not talking about a human architect that discovers it's not the way he wanted it. Or so what's the pshat? Why did he create a world and destroy it if he knew before he created it that he was going to destroy it and that he wouldn't be happy? Why did he do it? Because some people, some of Forsham, explain that it was created so that it would implant and impart and give over the power of a person making a mistake and being able to redo and rejuvenate something better. That means the teva would have been that if a person does something and he fails, he would never try again. I tried, it didn't go, goodbye. But to implant, to instill into his heart, into his psyche, the ability to thrive. Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 Talmidim, they all died. What did he do? He didn't say, all my Talmidim died. Goodbye. I tried my best. I had a yeshiva. They all died. Goodbye. I'm going to go now and retire. Didn't say that. He took 5 remaining Talmidim and he rebuilt the whole foundation and root of Chachamim with losing 24,000. That's why Borei Olamos Umachrivon, that Hashem gave the power in the world to not lose sight and not to give up, and to be able to thrive and throw himself into trying again. Now, some teach this, the word olam could mean world, or it could be like the word helam, hidden. that brings me to another chazal of this week, that Adam gave a name to every animal. But it wasn't like when we see a chair and we call it a chair. That has nothing to do with its essence. We just pick the name and we call it a chair. But when Adam looked at an animal and every insect, he saw its inner essence in spirituality and gave it a name that was connected to that animal. And that's why the Chidush Yarim, when somebody came to him and said, Rebbe, my wife gave birth, and this Shabbos I'm going to shul to name the new baby, what do you think which name should I give? And the Chidush Yarim said, the one time in a lifetime that a person has Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, even the simplest person, is when he goes up to the Torah and he says the name, because they are making sure in heaven that he's giving a name that's attached to that neshama. So you expect me to take away from you the privilege of once in a lifetime, or every time you'll have a child, and name the child, and I should tell you the name? But you have to pick it yourself, and they're going to give you Ruach HaKodesh. And I've seen in a couple of instances that a man came into shul, and he made up with his wife a name that they're going to give the baby. And when he got up to say the name to the Gabbai, by the Mishaberach, he came out with a different name. They had discussed 5 names, 10 names, and he said one of the other names. He didn't say what was supposed to be the name, because Min HaShamayim, they caused him to make the mistake, because the shoyrish neshama of that baby had to be connected to the name, and the name to the shoyrish neshama. And that brings us to the question, why was Adam given such a name? Adam means dirt or earth. That's a nice name to give someone? Adam, dirt. So they say that's because, and that's why it doesn't say Ki Tov on the 6th day when Adam was created. Because we don't know how a person's going to end up. Means when that insect, that bee or that hornet or that bug came into, that's what it remains. It is what it is, and there's no change. But by Adam we don't say Ki Tov, because we don't know where it's going to end up. What is going to happen with that person? Human beings have ability and have tremendous strength to be able to grow, to blossom. I remember some of the weakest boys in my class that everyone thought, oh, these are guys that they'll just drift through life. Nothing will ever become of them. They became the most successful. Some became Rashi Yeshiva, wrote Sfarim. Others became multimillionaires. And people were in shock. But a person has the potential. And his potential may not work for somebody else. Not every potential and the essence of every person is the same. But each one has tremendous. And that's the reason that in the Gemara, it says that one of the Amoraim went to another Amora. His Rebbe told him to go, and he said, go to him and get a bracha. And the bracha he gave him was Olamcha tira b'chayecha, that you should see your world in your lifetime, which he meant you should see benefits of Olam Haba and all of the excellence of reward, even in your lifetime here in Olam Hazeh. But the word, as I started to say before, Olamcha is Helam. The hidden aspects of your personality and character traits should develop and blossom in the fullest way to give you the fullest and the most of benefit for your good in your lifetime. You shouldn't drift. There are people who make Kiddush Friday night when they're 20 years old, and they have a Suda, and after the Suda, they sit with some friends, and they're eating potato chips, and they're eating pretzels, and when they're 70, 50 years later, they're still eating the pretzels and the potato chips, and still no Dvar Torah on their table Shabbos. There was zero growth. That they're 50, and that's why it says that some of the Amorim went up to heaven and they saw babies, people that were babies here in this world, look like elderly people in Olam Haba, and there were elderly people down here in this world, and they looked like teenagers. And the answer is because those babies, like the Arizal, who was Nifter at 33 or 36 or 38, or the Ramah at 33, they died young, but they had chock full of accomplishment in their young life. So up there they looked sagacious and elderly and well-developed. That's Olamcha, and that's what his Rebbe told him that was meant. You should reap the benefits in this world of your potential and grow, because we don't know. That's why Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Zechron L'Bracha, says in Parashas Shemos that Moshe Rabbeinu keeps saying the Hayeled. It doesn't talk about Moshe. It doesn't say any name, because we don't know who he's going to become. And until you know that, you can't designate greatness. He has to develop and come forth with the greatness, and then we can call him by his name. Now, Cain and Hevel is another colorful thing. And there were just two brothers, and one killed the other. He killed half the world. Now, one pasuk says, "Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv, vayokom Cain," and he killed his brother. But it says Cain said to his brother, but it doesn't say what he said. Doesn't say what he said. Just says he said. So, in the Medrash, it explains what was the problem between these two brothers. And there's like 20 opinions what they were really fighting about. Because from the pasuk it looks like Hashem took Hevel's sacrifice, korban, but he didn't take Cain's, and Cain was jealous or angry and he went and he killed him. But the Medrash says there were many other reasons, and the prevalent reason that the Medrash carries through is they were both fighting about where the Bais Hamikdash would be built. Would it be in territory that was a portion to Hevel and his children, or was it a portion in Eretz Israel that was for Cain? And that was their fight. So you would think half the world was killed. They were having a kosher fight. In other words, they weren't fighting over money. They were fighting over where the Bais Hamikdash, will it be in their land? And they were standing firm with each one's perspective and what he wanted. So the Mefarshim point out to us a very insightful, interesting point that's useful to us in our daily lives. Lot of disputes and bad feelings starts with the best of intention. It means the shul in their town or their mikveh, building a mikveh, building a shul, building a school, a yeshiva, is terrific. But at one of the dinners, one of them got insulted, and the ego suddenly sprout forth and covered all the good intention. So in this world, it's not a pure world of spirituality. We are humans with drawbacks, shortcomings, and perspectives that don't always work in our best thing. It's like the story, a true story. Somebody in shul was given an aliyah. He wanted shishi, but they gave him revi. And he pulled out of the shul. He was there 30 years. His wife had all her friends there. His children grew up with all of his friends. Oh, that didn't even come into question. Too bad. I'm pulling out of the shul. Why? You dared to give me revi, which is considered, it's still an aliyah 100%. But they give Hasidic Rebbes always get shishi, the 6th aliyah. That's today's Ushpizin, Yosef HaTzadik. And Yosef HaTzadik, today is the Ushpizin, and he was the backbone of Tzidkus. You see, Avram Avinu is called Avinu, and Yitzchak is called Avinu, and Yaakov is called Avinu, and Moshe is called Rabbeinu, and David is called Hamelech. But what is Yosef called? Hatzadik. Because that's how he was able to feed the whole world. Because it says that Parnasa comes from Kedusha and Tahara. And he was the tzaddik. He didn't fall in with Potiphar, who seduced him and wanted in every which way that he would be intimate with her, but he didn't fall in. And it says in Medrash that when he rode with his wagon, his chariot down the streets of Egypt, the girls were standing on the side throwing at him things to get his attention, that he was so good looking that they wanted him to look at them. But he never fell in with any aver, with any girl, like with Ashes Potiphar. So that's why he was able to be the foundation of feeding the world and saving the world. And people who are very careful in their Kedusha and their Torah are able indeed to break the roadblocks for Parnasa. You have some people, they opened a business, 6 months later they lost all the money, then they go back to their aunts and uncles and borrow more money and open a business, and again the same problem. The problem isn't the business, it's his Kedusha and his Tahara. How good is he careful in the sanctity of his neshama and how he is behaving. So I want to say to each and every one of you, we are at the forefront and at the gates of a new year, and each and every one of you listening tonight, and those of you who are not listening, should be zoicha to a year of excellent health, to gesund, and of nachas from your beautiful children, and be zoicha to encourage them and have them grow in their ruchnias. That's what you're leaving over, not the 10 million in the bank, which you won't see a drop of good coming from. You would have been better off to every week go into the grocery and pay the bill of someone who doesn't have money to buy bread and milk for the family, and come in and say to the owner of the grocery, give me your 20 biggest bills, and pay the 20 bills that they have a fresh slate and they're able to start fresh. So we should be able to have enough harchava and enough to be able to function with the time and the mind to open up a Gemara and to learn the hour or two each and every day, no matter what our vocation is and what we do and don't do. And we should have all a Shana Tova Umesuka